Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering Game 4 of the Eastern Ontario Open. Currently I am on a -1 score, lost my first two games, and then won my third, which is always good to stop the losing streak. And now we are playing against Matthew, who is a nearly 2100. So I've had pretty strong opponents all tournament here. Which is actually a good thing because even if the results aren't what we want, at least we're getting games against strong opponents where we're being challenged. So let's get into the game. E4 was played, and I played my Sicilian, knight f3, d6, and bishop b5 check. And this actually made me reconsider some things. Not just this game, but some other games in the future here. So we will get more into those discussions in a few months, honestly, because I'm covering two of these games a week. I might even go down to one, and I'm still going to upload 3 times a week, but when we get to more recent games, then that will be discussed more. So anyways, bishop b5 check was played. Bishop to d7 now. Bishop takes d7, and I end up taking with the queen. So queen takes d7 is the most natural move, honestly, because then the knight goes to c6, and you're fine and you're happy. Knight takes d7 is actually a very interesting decision as well, because the reason why knight takes d7 is interesting is because let's just say they go for some sort of Maroczy position. So here knight f6, c4 here. Well, actually, there's knight takes c4. Maybe I should be a little bit more careful with the moves I suggest. Let's say c4 here. Knight f6, knight c3, g6, castles, bishop g7, and then some d4 here. The knight actually is happier on d7 than c6. Which is kind of funny because the big idea here is that there's potential knight c5s, knight e5s, not really knight b6s, but the knight is actually generally just much happier here than on c6, because when the knight's on c6, it kind of blocks the c file, and that's not something we're happy with. But okay, queen takes d7 was played. We see c4, knight c6, knight c3, g6, d4. Just one note here, g6 might be very tempting to play in a position like this. Like, let's just say they play castles, and you might want to play g6, but I think this is actually incorrect strategically. And the reason why is because generally you don't want to play g6 against these c3, d4 positions where they get d4 in, because it actually blocks in your bishop quite a bit, and we're very unhappy there. So that's just one note, where if they play c4, now g6 makes a lot of sense. But I go g6 here. E5 is actually a very promising move as well, surprisingly. It's just you never really think of these moves when you see these positions. At least I don't, because it feels like there's just nothing in there, or it's like somehow I mess them up all the time. But it's actually reasonable. G6 is going for more than just a reasonable equal position, trying to go for maybe even a little bit more. D4, cd4, knight d4, and knight takes d4. I end up trading everything off here. I think knight f6 might have been better, though. The whole point is now they play f3 or something along those lines. Bishop g7, bishop to e3, castles, and we get just a standard Maroczy position here. But I end up taking on d4. Queen takes d4 and knight f6. And my idea with taking on d4 immediately was that when I play bishop g7, I'm trying to get a tempo on their queen. So I don't hate that idea for myself. Bishop e3, I was kind of expecting some sort of like knight d5 here. That's what I was like most worried about. Turns out we're fine after bishop g7. I thought maybe they can add more pressure with bishop g5, but we're fine after knight h5. I kept calculating here because I was really curious what would happen after a move like queen to d2. And turns out the move e6 actually works, which is not something that I saw. Generally, I'm going to tell you what a weakness of mine is here. So if you, by chance, play me in a tournament in the future, this is going to help you a lot. I tend to really struggle in these Maroczy positions as black. It's less that I don't like to play with positions where there's no activity. It's more so whenever there's no structural advantage. And generally, when we play e6, this is a very hard move for me to play, because when you get a position like this, there's a backwards pawn on d6. Plus, best move is bishop takes c3. Turns out black is fine, but that is not a nice move to play, from my perspective. So yeah, bishop to e3 was played. Not going into knight d5 complications. Bishop g7, f3, castles. So there's a huge threat here. If white is asleep at the wheel in castles, black is significantly better after knight g4. We get to trade off more minor pieces, which is good because in these types of positions, one thing that we should take note of is whenever you have less space, you want to trade off pieces generally. And this is one of those cases where not only do we want to trade off, but this is a very good trade for us because the dark square bishop now is removed, so there's never any kingside attacks. Plus, we get all the dark squares, which is just beautiful. We get all these beautiful dark squares on this long diagonal. And this bishop is much better than their knight, even if they get it on d5. Unless we go e5, which is a very stupid move. Because e5 is a great way to throw away the advantage. We're just lost strategically because we have a huge weakness here, and we just blocked in our own bishop. And you can actually see examples of that in an earlier game of mine where I was playing in the white side, where my opponent played this e5 move, and I got a lot of activity because of it. So I'll put that one in the description actually, and you can also see it in the tags up above right now. So if you want to click on that in the cards, that'll be there for you. So queen to d3 was played. I played rook f to c8. Generally, you want to play rook f to c8 because the rook on a8 is actually nicely placed, because we can go for a6 b5s, so attacking the pawn. And also if rook c8, the a7 pawn hangs, so we don't really want that. a6 now is a good move. I played queen c7 instead. Both are reasonable, I think. b3 was played, and a6. So now I have a threat of b5, which is nice. So if they do something a little silly, like king h1, now b5 comes, and black's just actually pretty much winning here, because there's not really a good way to defend here. Because they can't take, because we take on c3. So this would have been excellent for us. But there's many ways to avoid it. There's rook a to c1. There's moves like a4 preventing b5 for just the moment. So there are defenses here, and there's also even bishop d4, for example. But yeah, so rook a to c1 was decided on. I was thinking of knight d7 in the game, opening up the bishop, but I ended up going with queen a5. I've seen this move played in a lot of games where you're trying to go for b5 and again continue to attack this knight. Rook f d1 was played, and here, yeah, rook c6 is interesting. I ended up going with h5, and I know that this is a move, but it also can backfire, and again, you can see an example of that in the cards. I'll put that video as well in the cards and in the description if you want to see how h5, h4 can backfire. a4 was played, and now I play rook c7. I don't want to play rook c6 now because knight d5 is very annoying, where e7 is hanging. So the idea of rook c7 is that e7's defended. So if they go knight d5 here, we can take it. And either they go e takes or c takes. I think c takes wouldn't be correct because of rook a c8. They should probably go e takes. But then they definitely have an advantage here because the e file is quite weak, this e7 pawn specifically. So rook c7 was played. They played bishop d4. And again, I should always be playing e6 here. Actually, e6 is a very good move here, which is really surprising. So, I think the most important thing to look at is what if they take it, because if they don't, then that's just uninteresting to me. So, if they end up taking on d6, this is a huge mistake. Knight e8 attacks the queen and the knight, and it looks like, okay, well, queen d2, obvious, that's not hard to see. Rook d8. Attacking. So they should play b4 here. But if they don't, b4, queen takes b4 is actually totally playable here. Takes, rook takes, and bishop takes c3. The coordination for black here is actually just straight up winning in this position. There are threats though. Like white still does have threats. We can't just like be asleep at the wheel. For example, this if queen takes c4, that's a mistake because rook takes and then bishop d4 check wins the queen. But yeah, so e6 is very interesting. Knight e8, queen d2, rook d8, and if they go queen c2 instead, which I think is the more interesting move to look at, surprisingly, rook takes d1 works. Knight takes d1, there's mate on e1, so that doesn't work. And of course, if rook takes d1, then now the knight is hanging. So really crazy complicated variation here with e6. And maybe after knight e8 we can see the compensation anyways, but it's a very forcing variation, but it's a really cool one as well. Yeah, rook c7, bishop d4. I should have gone e6 again. And we kind of see a semi-similar thing here as well. Where if bishop takes f6, we do get the dark square bishop, and again, they just should not take, because rook c6, queen d2, and rook d8 now. And the best move for them is knight d5, which is not really a fun move for them to play. Queen c5 check. The variation still goes on. Let's just say king h1 here, e takes d5, c takes d5, queen e7, because we're attacking the queen. Again, these variations get kind of wild, but it's all generally based on the fact that like there's kind of issues on this d file in all these variations, and that's why e6 is actually okay to play. I played rook d7 instead, potentially going for e6 and d5 or b5, as this was the only thing I was really familiar with. I was familiar with h5 with like h4, h3 ideas, and I was familiar with like e6, d5, and b5. I just really don't like going for e6, d5 because it weakens the d6 pawn whenever you play e6. But here, rook b1 was played. I played rook e8, just like improving a piece. Again, here, h4 would have actually been more interesting, because then at least I get some activity. For example, queen g5, and then queen h5 here looks a little promising. Just because at least like there's a little bit of activity, even if it doesn't look like anything serious here. So rook e8 was played instead, queen e3, and I have to worry about like bishop e6, so I can't go like rook d8 or anything yet. And I go h4, because I'm just kind of struggling to find good moves, because like white's just better in these types of positions. They're very hard to play, honestly. And then knight d5 was played, which I was really happy about, because now things can start trading off in a way that I'm pretty happy about. We see knight takes d5, e takes d5, and I miss my chance here. I should have played something else. I should have played e5 immediately, where after e5 they shouldn't really take, because after rook takes e6, queen f2, bishop takes d4, let's say rook takes d4, I can play moves like h3, for example, just giving up that pawn because it was pretty weak anyways. And even though I have the weak d6 pawn, there's like threats of b5. Like I'm breaking out and breaking through, so things should kind of just like start trading down, and this should be totally fine for me actually. But I take on d4 instead, and they took on d4. I played queen b6. And here they should play h3. If they play h3, I think, yeah, they're fine here. They're actually arguably better as well, because they stop h3 from me. There's also like ideas of like f4 possibilities, not immediately, but it's always in the cards there. Rook e1, and now I have to play the move that I didn't play. I played h3 first, which I thought was fine, but they should ignore it. So I thought they were going to have to like react to it somehow, like takes, which I think I'm totally fine here after my move. But if they ignore it and play f4, then I can't make my breakthrough move, and that's actually a huge problem. So in this position, after g4, which is what they played, I have e5, and all of a sudden everything's just equalizing. Because if they take, there's rook takes e6, and we're just happy here. Rook takes rook e4. We can actually take on e4, funnily enough. Queen takes b6 and rook takes e1. This is totally playable. And if rook takes e3, this is actually the thing that we don't want to play, surprisingly, because this pawn's quite weak. So we actually want to go for the imbalance with rook takes e4 and rook takes e1 check. But they didn't go for that. They played rook d3, and now I could keep queens on. I decided to trade here. I'm not sure why. I was up quite a bit on the clock. If I play queen d8, it feels like pretty good for me. I think I might have been worried about some sort of like f4 in this position, which I think is reasonable to be a bit scared of. Engine gives b5, just doesn't care. Opens the position when like white's king is a little bit more open than black's here. But that's not something I saw. So yeah, I ended up trading, going g5 here to prevent f4. And they're going to probably win this pawn, but it's a rook ending where things are pretty closed, and it feels like it should actually just liquidate. a5 was played, which is a pretty good move. It makes a lot of sense because now I can't play a5 myself, for example, to like lock their pawns, which would have been something nice that we could have done. Like if they go here, then maybe we go a5 or we go b5. A5 prevents both moves, so that's always nice. I go f5. So I don't think I had to. I think that's totally fine though. I think rook b8 is also really interesting. King f2 and then like b6 or b5 or something. And things just kind of like trade down. There's lots of activity for me. It doesn't really matter if I lose this pawn that much because I have a lot of activity. But I went for f5 first. G takes f5, rook f8. I was thinking king f7 here actually. I didn't know what to make of the position after like b4 c5 though, but I really shouldn't have been scared of it. I ended up going rook f8 because my idea was I wanted to take and then go rook f4, king f2, rook takes f5, king g3, this rook over to f7, and yeah, white maybe had some chances with b4 here, and actually rook c3 going for c5 could have been pretty deadly. They ended up playing rook d1, where I play rook f4, trying to make it harder for them to go for like c5, because maybe b4 hangs. But they played rook e4. I played this rook over to f7 with the goal of taking with the rook, so I can attack the pawns over here. And yeah, this is actually pretty equal. I would say, yeah, black's clearly fighting for the draw, because this pawn's going to drop. And it feels like there's more chances to create a pass pawn for white. But white is down significantly in time. So my chances, not only holding the game, but maybe even like swindling somehow, are quite big. Rook c1 here. King f8, just getting over to the side of the board. b5, actually really nice move, was played here. I played king e7, takes, c5 now. And this was really impressive because the idea here is that if takes and then king takes, they have rook c6 check, winning my a pawn. So I go rook a4, they take, I have to take pretty much, rook c6 check, king takes d5, rook takes a6, winning that pawn. But this is just liquidated, and this is just going to be a draw. Rook a3. They end up going rook g6 immediately, which didn't really feel challenging. If they go like king g4 or something, I can go king d4 and start making my way to the f3 pawn. And with this pawn, and like there's not really a way to win this guy on h3. Like if they go for it ever, there's always e4. Like king takes h3, e4, for example, here is a problem for them. Even earlier, no matter what, like I'm threatening e4 in these positions, so they're not really in time. They have to move off. But they go rook g6 instead. e4 is not really a good move anymore because they take with check, which is very annoying. So I end up taking on a5, rook takes g5, rook a3, king g4, and we agreed to a draw in this position because king d4 is coming. And after king d4, we're either going to trade off with e4, or I'm going to bring my king over to f2, and this pawn's going to fall. So, yeah, pretty interesting game. Nothing too crazy happened here. I think the interesting part was maybe the opening discussion where queen takes d7 or knight takes d7, as well as some chances for white where they could have gotten an advantage many times, and like my only way to really break through ever was like playing this e6 move, which I just kept not playing because it's not really a comfortable move to make. But that kind of concludes the game. So I hope that was useful or at least interesting. And I will see you guys in the final round of the Eastern Ontario Open. Currently on a -1 score. Let's see if we can make it an even score finish off the tournament. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.